Detroit Lions fans, what is up? It's your boy Will back with another episode of Detroit Den 313. Thank you for tuning in. Tonight is going to be a good one. But before we get started, I got to talk about something. I got to say something that's been on my mind, and I feel like it is absolutely pertinent to the episode that we're talking about right now. I got to say, man, oh man, we have come a long way. We have come a long way. Martha sell the team. I still remember when I was seeing these t-shirts and flags and all types of things with coffee mugs were all over the place. Lions 0-16, calling for Martha to sell the team. Sheila taking over, and then it still that still didn't change the Lions fans. Lions fans were still. I still remember a moment, even moving on to Sheila. So when Sheila took over, I hate to even say this out loud, but my son Kingston, shout out to you, buddy, love you. My 9-year-old son Kingston, he is a Ravens fan. Like he loves the Detroit Lions, but he loves Lamar Jackson and he loves the Ravens. I know I should put him out. That's a whole nother story. But um, so naturally, Lions played the Ravens a few years ago. Maybe today when Justin Tucker decided to kick a field goal from I don't know a whole nother continent, but we were at that game, man, and Justin Tucker shows up to kick that field goal and breaks our hearts. But at halftime of that game, Calvin Johnson shows up and they were delivering his Hall of Fame statue and showing it to the fans and whatnot. It was a whole to do at halftime, a whole ceremony. And when Sheila came out to announce Calvin Johnson, the fans booed her so loud. It was maybe as loud as the Jared Goff chants, fast forward to that, right? It was crazy. And she handled it gracefully, man. I don't know how she did, but she handled it gracefully. She had no reaction to it. She just continued to press forward through the ceremony and say what she had to say, and then just got the heck out of there with grace, man. And then I didn't see any posts by her on Twitter or any comments or anything along those lines. So man, hats off to her. I will say that. Hats off to her. But that said, moving on to what we're really talking about today, the meat and potatoes of this things. We're talking about the Detroit Lions new. And I use the word new, and I'll explain that why. But their new secret to success, man. And I will say that is a three-part piece. So hang in there with me to the end, and I'll give you all three pieces. But to start that piece is going to be Detroit Lions fans. It's going to be the true blue Detroit Lions fans that have been through it. We've been through 0-16. We've been through bad team after bad team. We've been through every year hoping that the Detroit Lions were going to do something, only to get our hearts broke by bad calls, by bad play, by bad coaching decisions, by bad drafts, I mean, the list goes on. This franchise has been an absolute nightmare for 50 plus years. And man, it's just been tough. Like my whole lifetime, the Detroit Lions have been bad for the most part. We've had moments. But a good year here and there, a decent year here and there at most. We haven't been a playoff team. We've never been a team until now that I woke up and I said, "Hey man, we're about to kick some butt today." So this whole thing is new for these Detroit Lions fans, and you can tell, man. You can tell because they are really leaning into it. And that leads me to the next phase of the secret to our success, and that's the atmosphere. I was at that playoff game against the Rams. Those Jared Goff chants, the atmosphere in general, Detroit Lions fans, the way they showed up and showed out, absolutely unbelievable. Everybody who I've heard talk about pretty much even the regular season games, but those playoff games, you're hearing the words electric, unbelievable, brain stamp moment, something I'll never forget ever. I have to get season tickets for those who weren't season tickets holders, right? And now look at the situation. You can't even get season tickets with the Detroit Lions have a waiting list for season tickets. I remember a time to where my buddy had season tickets and he couldn't give them away. He was having a hard time getting people to go to the games for free. Now you have a hard time finding a ticket for a decent price, man. Those things are so driven up. Thank goodness I'm a season ticket holder. And I got ahead of this thing. But that being said, man, the atmosphere. So that's the first two things. You got the people, right? The people that's been through the thick and thin, and you got some new bandwagon people. Of course, you start winning, you're going to get those bandwagoners, but everybody appreciates what we now have. They either know the history and went through it, or if they didn't go through it, they're just happy that they finally have a reason to be excited about the Detroit Lions. The atmosphere is crazy, right? And when we talk about atmosphere, before I move on to that last piece, and I think that last piece is important, I'm going to say this. It all started with this guy, and that's after Sheila. But when we hired Dan Campbell, and I mean, when I mean started, I mean the atmosphere. He went on and he started talking about biting kneecaps, and people started making fun of him. It was a meme. It was gifs. It was YouTube shorts. It was the topic of ESPN. People were clowning him, crying, talking about how passionate he was. They were just clowning this guy, Dan Campbell. And now, look at him now. People are trying to adopt the philosophies and the things that he brings to his NFL teams. Hats off to him. If you look at him in that picture, I'll put it up one more time. The guy is larger than life. The dude is towering and imposing over Aleem McNeil, who is a very large man without shoulder pads on. Dan Campbell's got no shoulder pads on. Aleem's there full gear, and Dan Campbell is towering over him. And I think his shoulders are about as broad as Aleem's with the shoulder pads on. So that said, moving on to Dan Campbell, man, and that atmosphere and that culture that I'm talking about, right? Moving on from him, going to Brad Holmes, the villain, the salty, the culture, the t-shirts. They've created an atmosphere to where the players believe, the coaches believe, they use these catchphrases, they get behind things, they find ways to drive their guys, whether it's the guys in the front office, whether it's the coaching staff, whether it's the players. They get these words, they get these little things to get into these guys' psychologicals, right? And they start just using it to drive these guys. This season, it's what? It's going to take more. They knew that they couldn't allow these guys to get complacent, so they immediately started the psychological game. It's not just about football, right? It's about the mindset that you're in when you go out there on that football field. They are constantly doing things to keep these guys locked in and driven on the goal. Man, Brad Holmes, I tip my hat to you. You're a freaking genius. Staying on the atmosphere. Staying on the atmosphere. We move on to the NFL draft, man. 2024 NFL draft. Crazy. Again, Detroit Lions showed up, showed out. Draft was crazy, broke records. If you were down there, you know. If you seen it on TV, I'm quite sure you could see how it was. It was amazing. I'm so glad that I got an opportunity to be a part of it. When you looked out, you just saw it what felt like miles of people. It felt like when you looked out there, it looked like just people were never going to stop. Detroit showed up and showed out again. Again, we're talking atmosphere, atmosphere. And again, people look at Detroit and they're like, man, and this is one of my, if you watch the show, you know I got a big time grievance with Micah Parsons, because Micah Parsons said that nobody would ever want to come to Detroit. Detroit is a trash city. Why would anybody want to come here? Like, you know, whatever. And that really burned me up, man, because if you don't know, man, Detroit is beautiful. Detroit has some great spots that you can go hang out downtown. Detroit has a whole lot to offer. You hear these players talking about Detroit now, man, and all the things that there is to do, and just the environment, especially if you're in and around downtown, or if you go to some of our suburban areas just outside of Detroit, man, there's a lot to do in Detroit, and Detroit has a lot to offer, man, from just being neighboring Canada, man, beautiful waterfront. The list goes on. I'm not going to get into that. The show's not about that, but Detroit is a special place, man. And for anybody to say that it's a trash city, man, you just don't know. And I lose respect for you when people talk down on this. But anyways, so Detroit, the atmosphere again, this is starting to become a party. It's starting to become a special place to be when you start talking about what goes on here. This is no longer just about football, man. This is a show. Now, let's get into this, man. Let's get into this. You got Hollywood Hogan at training camp, right? Like I talked about it before. You're talking about the University of Michigan. You're talking about Ric Flair. You're talking about the Jordan gear. What do we got? We got jersey reveals, right? New black jerseys. They know how to get into the psyche of these players. They do not know how to create an atmosphere. Fast forward. You got our top dog, our number one receiver, arguably one of the number one receivers across the whole NFL, if you ask me. He's on Netflix, right? Going to be a world renowned name, man. Now, everybody's got Netflix, everybody's watching these shows. You're going to get to fall in love with Amon-Ra St. Brown. How could you not? The dude's a flat out dog, man. Fast forward, and again, still talking about atmosphere. Clarissa Shields at training camp with our first round draft pick, right? Clarissa Shields, if you don't know, two-time gold medalist. She's doing mixed martial arts, still dominating the boxing game. Just a special athlete, and she wants to be involved. Flint Town stand up for Clarissa Shields, but she wants to be involved with the Detroit Lions because this is no longer just football. This is a show. This is special. This is America's team, right? Like this is something that you don't want to miss. This is something that people are fighting to get tickets for. You're seeing celebrities at these football games now. This isn't just you're looking around and it's an empty house at Ford Field. This is standing room only. Whatever I got to do, sell an organ if I got to get these tickets. It's crazy, man. So the last part of that, as these guys really took the time to connect, right, with the players and the personnel that have been a part of the Detroit Lions struggle, but stayed tried and true, or that were hugely committed to the organization when they were here and maybe finished thing on some sour ties, i.e. Calvin Johnson. You see him back in the mix, meeting and greeting people, touring people around, showing up at the games, being introduced at halftime. Barry Sanders back, right? Same thing. And another person that was a fundamental piece to getting this thing back on a successful direction, Chris Spielman, right? Hadn't heard anything about Chris Spielman. Chris Spielman was talking about working for different organizations or kind of riding off into the sunset with his retirement. Now, where's he at now? Back with these Detroit Lions where he should be, laying a foundation, probably whispering in Brad's ear about drafting guys like Jack Campbell, man. It's just, when I look at these Detroit Lions, right, these are the three things that I feel like make us special and different than any other teams across the league. You talk about the words grit, right? Detroit people, Detroit fans represent grit, Motor City, right? It goes back in our history, just hard workers willing to go and work in these factories to put food on the table for our families. We're going to ride and die with our team, man, period. Atmosphere. We got Motown, we got Eminem, we got 8 Mile. Like, listen, the atmosphere, as I said, is electric, and we've got the history, right? We got the history of top players across this league. I'd say we might have the best running back ever and the best receiver ever. And if not, both of them are in the conversation, man. So leave it in the comments, guys. How do you feel? Do you feel like that these three things are kind of a secret weapon for the Detroit Lions and their success? Because to me, atmosphere, right? We're talking about that history, and we're talking about us as Detroit Lions fans. I feel like that sets us apart. Drop in the comments how you feel. I'll be back with another episode. Peace.